When I was 13 years old, I wrote my first and my last novel. It was about the Second World War, and the main character was Arnold, and the father of Arnold was working with the Germans, and Arnold was secretly working with the opposition, and nobody knew, of course, and the whole story ended up dramatically. I ended this story with a heartfelt cry of a teenager. Why do people never learn? Waarom leren mensen niet? And as a reminder, I wrote down, we zijn samen dezelfde mensen. We're all the same people. More frustrations followed during my early 20s. I read tons of books about politics and wars, and I sifted out newspapers to find out what the answers, the solutions, and above all, the truth were. And I was sometimes even angry on the newsreader. And when I had discussions during dinner, I always dominated the conversations. And my parents are here, so they know everything about this. Then, in 2002, I read 3 books of the war in Yugoslavia that happened in the 90s. And these books described 3 views. One from the Serbian, one from the Croatian, and one from the Bosnian Muslim side. And the crazy thing was that all these books were right, but they had completely opposite visions. That confused me, and I decided to visit the region with my own car. And after 3 days of driving, I arrived in the city of Sarajevo. To my own surprise, it wasn't that far. I had 3 goals. One was finding the truth. The second was finding out the guilt question, who was guilty. And the third one was figure out a solution for the future. And I gave myself 3 weeks to figure it out. After 3 weeks, I drove back home without any conclusion. I met so many different people with different stories and different perspectives, different ideas, that the idea of one solution completely disappeared. I found maybe 10,000 of truths. And of course, I had read 3 books, but it still didn't make me a historian. Back home, I didn't talk so much about this trip. I've got the idea that I had felt I didn't reach my goals. And it was like there was a question mark in my head. I was more confused after this trip than before. In the years that followed, I started working as a photographer, and I worked a lot for all kinds of organizations like UNICEF and CARE. And in assignment for them, I made more than 40 trips. I made reportages in Asia, South America, Middle East, Africa, a lot in Africa. And it was about HIV. I saw large refugee camps. I saw immense poverty. And I saw the horrible effects of cluster bombs and landmines. And always, when I traveled back home, I was lost in thoughts. I was always busy with, what can I do with this? What is the solution? What is my role in it? And it leaned immensely on my shoulders. The only thing I felt that I could do was becoming angry on the world and disappointed. And so I did. Well, when I was in Amsterdam, I was drinking a coffee. I live in Amsterdam. I was drinking a coffee with a colleague of mine on a Saturday afternoon. And I told him, well, it's a fucked up world. It's too late to make something good out of this. But, as you have to know, this colleague was 1 generation older, and he had much more experience than I had. So he was silent, and he looked at me, and he said, well, can I ask you something? I said, yeah, of course, you can ask me something. He said, to be honest, I only hear you in this story, what you think that the solutions are. But do you ever talk to the people you photograph? Do you ask them what they are proud of? Do you laugh with them? Do you ask them how they see their situation? That conversation impressed me a lot. And there was another confrontation. I was driving on the Dutch highway in an evening, and I listened to the radio, and there was an interview with a woman, and she worked for more than 35 years at the UN. And she saw all the conflict areas in the world. And the interviewer asked her, well, after everything you've seen, didn't it make you cynical? And then she answered, and I will never forget this, she answered, no, because cynicism is a luxury I can't afford. It blew my mind. I stopped at the next petrol station. I got my phone out of my bag and I typed in my phone, cynicism is a luxury I can't afford. Cynicism is a luxury I can't afford. Those two confrontations were the beginning of a change in my own behavior. It wasn't that interesting anymore to see the world as disappointed, and angry was not an option anymore. And slightly, I started to see that the world is, and has always been, a bumpy road with thousands of layers. And that I was just a really, really small, tiny part in it. That made some space in my mind, and I started to listen to other people. And many people were telling me their stories. And I could forget my own ideas and my own judgments. It wasn't anymore about understanding the world. It was much more about having a simple conversation and trying to understand each other. It feels like we forget this often, listening to each other. In a time where people receive news updates on their phones for 24 hours a day, it feels like we know everything. And sometimes it's fascinating to hear the extreme judgments people have about populations they've never met or regions they've never been. News, of course, is a good way to stay updated, but we have to be aware that it is also a thing that always focuses on the extreme things in life or the extreme events of that day. And I started to think about this. And I started to think about, what can I do with this? And, well, normally the news is about extreme events, but can I also focus on a normal Monday afternoon when nothing is happening? And I decided to make some projects about this normal Monday afternoon when nothing is happening. I really want to give people the chance to see the news, but to see it in a wider perspective, like I had seen in all my trips. So the first project I want to show you 4 projects now. The first project, we went to Baghdad, to Iraq. And of course, Baghdad is a place we normally know from bomb attacks and from terrorism. And there were 4 bomb attacks during our stay. But we chose not to focus on the bomb attacks, but we chose to focus on one little question. A question we all know. It was the question, how are you doing? And I did this together with Pauline Bakker, and we did long interviews with mothers, children, students, but also bodybuilders, construction workers. And this story was published in the New York Times, and I got lots of reactions, positive reactions from people who said, whoa, that's interesting. But there was one email that surprised me most. It was from a guy from the US, and he emailed me. He said, "Thank you so much for showing us. Well, it hurts because I really didn't understand that these kind of people were living there too." And that email gave me the power to start with a new project. And this time I went to Lebanon together with my husband, Philip, who is an art director and a filmmaker. And we decided to ask our Facebook friends, what do you want to know from a Syrian refugee? Because as you know, in Lebanon there are at the moment 1.3 million Syrian refugees. And people came up with all kinds of different questions, like, what did your life look like 5 years ago? Or who's your favorite football player? And we went to the Syrian camps. We asked the questions on behalf of our Facebook friends. We filmed the answer, and we put the answer back on the timeline of the questionnaire. There were 17 clips, but here you can see a short compilation of the 17 clips.
مرحبا لي أنا إيمان كنو.
هاي سيدني أنا راما سليمان من سوريا الحسكة.
مرحبا جاكلين، أنا مصطفى المحمد من محافظة حماه.
مرحبا يوهان، كيفك يوهان؟ أنا من عائلة كتير، اسمي يوهان، كتير ضيعت بالأهلي.
أنا فخور إنه تحقق حلمي وصرت أمشي.
بدي أطبخ سميد.
وأنا هون اللي بدرس الأولاد، أنا عم علمهم مشان آخذ حسنات، واللي بعرفه من الصف الأول أنا عم علمهم إياه.
بالنسبة للمساعد يعني هلا نحن بحاجة لمساعدة طبية أكثر شيء يعني كموضوع إنساني وطبي يعني.
والله لا طالعت إلا بلبسي طلعت لهون يعني جيت.
اشتقنا لبيتنا، اشتقنا لكنيستنا.
وأنا صار يمكن شي 4 سنين لسه ما شفت أخي.
اشتقت للشمس بالسورية.
أتمنى أن نرجع لسوريا ومشتاقين على البلد كتير.
أمسي.
He really... He really wanted to say his the only words he knew, I miss you, so we gave him the chance. Of course, people were completely surprised when they got an answer back. And with these films, we tried to build a bridge between two cultures. Well, we moved on. The next project, we made it in Afghanistan, and we went to Kabul. And of course, this is also a place that we know from bomb attacks. But we did something different. We asked the inhabitants of Kabul, what is your favorite place of the city? And can you bring us there? And are we allowed to make a portrait of you on your favorite spot? A thing that, if you ask this in New York, is completely normal. But in Kabul, we are surprised. The first woman was Marieke. And Marieke, her favorite place was having a picnic in the Bagbaboer Park. And then we have Chakila, and Chakila has her own driving school. She's a very progressive woman, and her favorite place was behind the steering wheel of her car. Then we met Arash, and Arash was a very good horse driver, and his favorite place was a beach near a lake just outside of Kabul. We met Gotra, and Gotra, she was working in a beauty parlor, and her favorite place was, of course, the beauty parlor where she was working. And at last we met Reda and Leza, and their favorite place was their own living room, because they told us we don't feel safe outside, so our favorite place is the living room. And of course, we had a lot of conversations about the war and what people have been through. But we saw it from a different perspective. The last project I want to show you is a project we have made in Greece, on the Greek island of Lesbos. And as you know, many Syrian refugees arrived there last summer. And what we did was we asked European tourists and Syrian refugees to talk with each other, sitting on a bench in the park or overlooking the sea. And people had an earphone in their ear, and we had a translator on the spot. So that's why people could understand each other. They talked about all kinds of different things. It was, of course, about the war and the boat trip, but also about love, about cars, about marriage, about career, about everything. And we made a film of 22 minutes out of it. You can watch it online. But of course, I don't have 22 minutes here, so I show you the trailer.
We take a selfie together, Hassan, because we're going to show the people that we love each other.
Ik kom uit het zuiden van Nederland en waar kom jij vandaan?
I am من Syria.
You came from Turkey with a boat.
With a boat, yeah.
Do you want to explain me why you came here?
الحقيقة أنا من الناس اللي تعرضوا للموت في سوريا 3 مرات.
I'm a tourist, and in 3 days we fly back to Germany.
إن شاء الله نشتينا هناك.
What's your favorite movie?
وانت شو بتتمنى ان شاء الله؟ Ik ga morgen in het zwembad liggen. Een beetje bruin worden en een stagiair.
Word jij ook uitgehuwelijkt of mag jij zelf je partner kiezen?
متى كانت أجمل لحظة في حياتك؟
het mooiste moment van mijn leven.
شو بكون موقفه إذا كان في رجال لازم سوري؟
Well, maybe it's nice to tell that almost every person in this film is still in contact with each other. And Otis, who said, well, I want to become brown like you, he got a girlfriend after this film. And then Arash was, the other guy was, liked everything on Facebook. It was really funny. We were so happy that this film was shown on the Dutch TV, but also in the international media. It was shown on the UN headquarters in New York, and even Coldplay posted it on his timeline. So we got a lot of attention with this film. Well, I have to end my talk, and well, the title of my talk was "Don't use the news to understand the world." And maybe I can say something better. Maybe it's don't try to understand the world at all. The only thing you can do is keep talking with each other and listening. Because I believe that's where the real power is. Thank you so much for your time.